Okay, folks. Hello, everyone. Good morning. Thanks for coming. For my friends here at this table, all these respective mics are live or on, so say what you say, right? But we're happy to have everybody here today to continue our budget discussion focusing on Capitol Day. So without that, I'll go to our city administrator, and then I'm sure he'll do what he does.
I'm just going to turn over to Basha. Go ahead.
Roger that. So happy to have you again, Ms. Basha.
Okay.
Today, this morning, whatever.
Yes. Good morning. My name is Basha Gerlach, and we are here to present the capital budget for fiscal year 2026. So first, we're all familiar with these slides. This is kind of the schedule that we're going through. We already had our work plan and introduction to the budget. Last Saturday, on Tuesday, we discussed the operating budget. And then today, we are here to discuss the capital funding of our CIP as well as the actual CIP program, and Clay will take that. And if we have any follow-ups that need to be addressed, we will do that at a later time. Okay? Kind of once again, all of these slides are fairly familiar to you all. So the budget process, like I said, it's almost a year-long process. We start in July, and we go through and make sure that we review all of the accounts and get our departmental input. And we are here today on February 8th, so that's where the star is. And then we'll certify the budget on and around April 23rd. And in June, we will submit the budget document to the GFOA, Government Finance Office Association, for the award. Okay? Once again, the fiscal year 2020 budget highlights. This is a familiar slide. It's a balanced budget that complies with financial policies and liquidity targets. It maintains the property tax at $16.61 per 1,000 taxable valuation. It is core competency driven and focused and continues to deliver current service levels. Okay? So quick introductory. This is once again a familiar slide. Their overall budget for fiscal year 2026 is about $271.5 million, which is an increase of 12%. Most of it can be contributed to the increase of the capital budget, which increased about 42%, and that is mostly due to additional grant funding that we are receiving. So, just brief highlights. Next, we will kind of go over the capital program. The capital projects typically cost over $5,000, and they have a life expectancy of about 5 years. In Davenport, we like to set up capital projects that are over $50,000 and have a useful life of more than 5 years. Typically, our primary funding sources for the capital improvement program would be our debt service fund, local option sales tax fund, road use tax fund, any of the enterprise funds, as well as grants and partnerships and donations from the community. We also do fund some projects with the general fund if there's capacity there, or the special public safety fund. Any questions? Perfect. So first, we're just gonna go over the debt service fund. The current debt service fund levy. Hannah, next slide. Thank you. The debt service fund levy currently is at $2.05 per $1,000. And it generates about $11.2 million in property tax revenues for the particular fund. We work closely with our financial advisors to make sure that that fund has capacity for all of our borrowing needs. The levy is restricted for the purposes of funding principal and interest payments for our outstanding debt, which mostly would be general obligation bonds. Our bond rating agencies look at this fund very closely to make sure that we have capacity and that we have enough borrowing power to sustain our capital needs. Currently, the Iowa Code limits local governments to a debt of 5% of their gross valuations. So in fiscal year 2024, our gross valuations, assessed valuations were at about $8.5 billion. So that translates of our borrowing power to be at about $424 million. Currently, we have outstanding debt of about $205 million. So our capacity is currently at about $219 million if needed. Obviously, we never want to go up that high, but that is our capacity that we have remaining. The $2.05 for the levy, it is not capped. Yep. So currently, the fund has about just less than $26 million. We are predicting that the fund will grow its cash to about $30 million by the end of fiscal year 2025. Once again, this particular fund has gone from a negative cash balance to a positive. And we once again work closely with our financial advisors to make sure that we have enough capacity, enough cash in order to meet our obligations. In order to access the funding in this fund, you do have to have outstanding debt, so we can only pay principal interest payments in order to utilize it, but we have used this fund strategically, for example, funding our Station 3. So we did a short-term borrowing of 1 year to build that station. $3 million came from our general fund, and about $8 million came from the debt service fund, and we paid it off within 1 year. So we can continue to do that with facilities needs. The next slide kind of talks about the fund performance. Once again, it shows you what our general obligation outstanding amount is. As you can see, we have been trending lower on our outstanding debt amount, and then we kind of had a small spike in 2023, but once again, that is the Fire Station 3 that we had to do the borrowing in order to access those funds. And then, once again, fiscal year 2024, the general obligation bonds were lowered. And as you can see on the graph next to it, we continue to grow our debt capacity, so that's good. And the next slide depicts the debt service fund cash balances. As I mentioned on Tuesday, these graphs show a lot of data, but once again, I like them because it represents where we were and where we're at today. So we don't want to go back to the 2010, 2011 levels where we had negative cash in this particular fund of about $2.61 million, and today we're just shy of $26 million. So it's definitely represents of where we've been and where we want to be. Any questions on the debt service fund? No? Okay, so now we'll just move on to our local option sales tax fund. So a referendum was passed in 1988 to impose a 1% tax, sales tax. 60% of those funds that we receive are allocated to the property tax relief. Typically, we will transfer that 60% to either a debt service fund, or we do in recent years, we started doing a transfer to the general fund for property tax relief. And then the other 40% that we receive is used for capital investments. In 2023, the Department of Revenue actually changed their formula of how this tax is calculated. And it is distributed based on actual tax receipts from the prior month. In fiscal year 2026, the budget of revenues is about $18.3 million, which is a very conservative number. And as you can see, we had about $20.1 million worth of expenditures. So there's about a difference of close to $2 million, and that $2 million can be attributed to the additional funding we provided to the capital improvement project so that we can maximize our grants. And there is capacity in the fund with the fund balance. Any questions? Okay. In 2024, this slide depicts the local option sales tax fund revenues. In fiscal year 2024, we budgeted about $17.2 million in revenues, and we actually received $23.5 million in revenues. Yes, Alderman Grip.
So how come prior to 2020, our budgeted was close to our actual, and then recently it's different?
So it's different because they changed the formula of how they distribute that funding.
Okay, that's from.
Yeah.
Okay, got it.
Yeah, so I think they became more accurate and what we actually receive within our community. And a lot of times they were sending us true-up payments, which were greater, starting in 2020, which were greater than what we ever anticipated. And it just reflects what actually is happening, where before the formula wasn't as accurate.
So will we change our budget going forward?
So I'll address that in another slide. With local option sales tax being somewhat elastic, thank you, and potential for volatility, we don't want to go to the top of that revenue amount. I think local option sales tax is definitely driven by the economy, and people can stop spending as much money as they have in the past.
Looks to me like local option sales tax went up during the COVID years.
It did, yep. And once again,
You seem to tie this to all this other stuff. It seems like COVID shut everything down, yet our sales tax went up. That's kind of interesting.
yep, and I think part of it is the formula change as well, of how that tax was being distributed, can be attributed to that as well. Yep. So next slide. Once again, this particular fund continues to exceed our revenue expectations, and we are deploying an aggressive conservative budgeting approach within this fund, because once again, it has a potential for higher volatility. Something to note, this year we actually increased the revenue amount to $18 million opposed to the $17.2 million that we budgeted last year.
In the state, if you're doing the formula, they get a portion of this?
So the way the formula is, I actually have it. I can share the formula with you, so you can see where the money's going.
Get a piece of it?
I don't believe so. I think it goes to the counties and the jurisdictions that it's located to. Yep. Yep, all of it goes to the jurisdictions or the county. None of it goes to the state. However, they are proposing or talking about having the state control the local option sales tax. So that's a consideration in Des Moines as well. Not necessarily the amount we can levy, but how it is distributed to all the districts and jurisdictions and the county. Yep,
They will divvy it out, which is
Yeah.
concerning.
yep. Okay. So the next slide kind of depicts the fiscal year 2026. 2026 expenditures. As you can see, a lot of it goes to non-departmental expenses, which that funds our capital improvement projects, as well as that's the transfers to our debt service fund, as well as our general fund. We are budgeting about $10.3 million going to the debt service fund, about $6 million to the capital projects fund, just over $500,000 to the general fund, and Riverfront Improvement has $75,000 transfer into its fund. Like I mentioned before, the expenditures for fiscal year 2026 is about $20 million, and the revenues are about $18 million, so there's a variance of that $2 million, and that $2 million is the additional funding we provided to the capital improvement program so that we can maximize our grants. Any questions? As you can see, over the years, the fund balance in this particular fund has grown to about $21.2 million in fiscal year 2024, and that is why we felt comfortable that the additional $2 million can be spent on maximizing those grants. Any questions? Okay. Next is the road use tax fund. So the road use tax fund was established by the state of Iowa in 1949, and about 20% of its collected revenues are distributed to the cities. Revenues are used and designed for use for maintaining, improving city's street network and its system, and it's essentially used for any improvements that happen between the two curbs. In fiscal year 2015, or calendar year 2015, the state approved an additional 10-cent per gallon increase, which produced in about $1.6 million of additional revenues for the city. And at that point, that funding was invested directly into the streets maintenance program per council direction. And in fiscal year 2026, because the fund has capacity, we allowed to use some of our fund balance towards our capital improvement program. Once again, we are trying to maximize our grant, and we needed those additional funds in order to have match. So we essentially gave a bucket of money of the additional $2 million in the capital, in the local option sales tax, and a bucket of money of $800,000 for the road use tax, and the funding was used towards eligible projects. Yep. So as you can see, the road use tax fund revenues, they've been trending up. There's a blimp in year 2021, we received additional COVID money that year, so that's why there's kind of a additional blimp there. But otherwise, they are pretty steady. And in fiscal year 2024, our actual revenues were about $14.38 million. The next slide talks about our revenues. I'm sorry, our expenditures for that particular fund. We have about $15.7 million in expenses and about $14.8 million in revenues. Once again, the discrepancy there is the additional $800,000 provided towards the CIP program. Most of the fund, over 50%, is used towards salaries and benefits that we improve streets with, as well as during winter street maintenance when it comes to snow plowing and things like that. Any questions? And once again, this particular fund continues to grow its fund balance. In 2024, the fund balance was $6.4 million, and that represents about 54% of our operating dollars. And that is why we felt comfortable that we can spend about an additional $800,000 towards the CIP program. Yes.
Just so I get a feel for what this money buys us, what does it cost us, say, to repair an artery for a mile? I'm trying to figure out, looking at how much money we've got, where we can apply it, and what the expenditure is going to have to be to fix some of the roads.
Yep, so I will have Clay address that question right now, because, yep.
Sure. So we can get you a generic cost per mile. I'll obviously say there's variables with every project, both in lane width, for instance. 53rd is much larger width than, let's say, Locust, which is different than West Central Park, so there is some variety there. But as we'll go through all the street stuff, we can go over specifically how much.
I mean, the numbers look great, but I'm just trying to figure out.
Here's a good average.
A mile of concrete.
Yeah.
One of our bigger projects of last year was Locust from Eastern to Grand. So that was a mill and overlay, so not even a full reconstruction. That project was about $1.6 million, just to give you a sense of cost. And of that particular bucket of money that we have, thank you, sir, is about $4.6 million. So as we go through all of these, especially as we get into the street slides, we'll kind of walk through that it takes a lot of money to fix some of our bigger streets. But we can give you a cost breakdown per mile, and I can give it to you based on an arterial road, a collector, and neighborhoods as well. So we'll break them down by all the different categories.
Okay, thank you.
Yep.
So is there any other questions when it comes to the funding of the capital improvement program?
I have a quick comment for the group. When you're commenting or asking questions, please make sure to use the mics. We're not picking up the audio for your comments or questions. So Basha's good on this end, but the other end, we're having issues, so. Thank you.
Okay, so I will turn it over to Clay.
Yeah, so on the microphone itself, if the light's on and it's not blinking, it's not muted. Just press it once and then it's muted, so.
Yes, that's mine. Good morning, everyone. So as we roll through, we'll go through the capital program as a whole, running through a bunch of numbers before we dive into specific projects as we go. So as you are all aware, our CIP is a 6-year plan. Year 1 is the only year that receives funding, so that's what we're going over now. Years 2 through 6 is basically a projection as of today of what we can, of what we feel like can be projected for the community. Year 1, and I'll probably be saying this throughout, year 1 is for fiscal year 26, 2 through 7 is fiscal year 27 through 31. In terms of totality and summary, the budget for the upcoming fiscal year is $67.9 million. Year 2 is $60 million, and then a little bit under that, year 3 at $57. And then we start coming in the last 3 years, $38 million, $35, $34. The reason of the huge differences is our confidence in grants that we've been able to procure over the next couple of years. We don't generally project out 6 years because a lot can happen in a 6-year time frame. And so as we move that forward, I would like to point out, in general, over the last 12 years, our average total cost for our CIP is generally at $45 million. So you can kind of see that we have some really big numbers here as we go forward, and I think that we can do some really large-scale projects as we go. I'd say, I think 2016 was the biggest number I've seen in 12 years, and that was around $63 million, so this is a substantial amount. And then I'll also say next week, I'm going to provide an update to a memo that I gave you all last year that is a comprehensive list of all of our horizontal and vertical infrastructure projects, because sometimes these projects take years and years to develop. Sometimes we're waiting for grants. Sometimes we're going through a lot of environmental clearances that just naturally take time. And so just to kind of keep you all updated, because there is a substantial amount of work going. Okay. So in the end, $294 million across the 6 years. Next, we always like to show this chart as we go through categories of what the piece of the pie looks like. The biggest piece is our streets, and the second biggest is actually our water pollution control plant, followed by sewers. It's not on a slide, but we always like to bundle these things up. So the sewer collection system is what I like to say is in reference, includes the sanitary sewer, stormwater conveyance system, and the water pollution control plant. Just in year 1 alone, we have over $21 million in the street network, which comprises streets themselves, plus traffic engineering, plus bridges. You've got about $28.7 million. So in essence, if we were to take those things, about 74% of this year's 2026 CIP is in streets, the street network, and the sewer collection system. So that continues to address our infrastructure.
So Clay, I'll say thank you for that, because that's the number one thing we continue to hear, both in the survey and regular talking to folks, and you're executing that. So
Yes.
Thank you.
Next, we're going to run through funding categories. And so as we go through, so once again, these are just the individual breakdown of the categories as you have it in your budget book, our big massive binder that Basha has provided. So in bridges, and this is just year 1, $5.7 million for facility maintenance, about 3.2. I'm not going to touch on all of them. Parks and Recreation, 3.4 million. Sanitary sewer, 7 million. Streets, 22.1 million. And our water pollution control plant, 13.3 million. Looking at that in a different light, looking at from a funding perspective, going a little bit about what Basha just brought on, different funding sources actually make up our capital plan. I'll do a plug really quick for Davenport U. I think it's a great, fantastic way for our citizens to kind of have a deep dive into our government. A lot of times, you all get this question, and I know I get this question, well, why can't, if you have 67 million, why can't all 67 million go into streets? Legally, it can't, because a lot of these funding sources have restrictions. For instance, sanitary sewers. We specifically levy, we have a levy that's specifically to repair the sewer system, and that's the only thing it can be used for. Same with our solid waste fees, our clean water fees, so they all have pieces. So of that, our big $67 million CIP, $7 million of it is bonds abated by the sewer fund, a little under $900,000 for bonds abated by solid waste. A couple other interesting ones, federal and state grants, 18 million of that we've been able to leverage local resources against state and federal grant opportunities. Our general obligation bond, about 18 million, that's normal as we have over the last number of years. Local sales tax, once again, to reiterate something Bosch has said, normally it's at 4 million, but because of the number of, one of the great things of getting grants is you're leveraging your resources against other people's funding. I guess you say the other side of it is then you need to generally have whatever is cost share. So generally for most grants is an 80-20 match. The feds and state will provide you 80% of the cost, you need to provide 20%. And for some of these larger numbers, the match in itself is fairly large. So 6 million in local sales tax and road use tax is 2.4 for this year. Normally it's the 1.6, which is from when the state increased the road use tax by 10 cents.
So I just want to say thanks to our federal and state partners in grants and working and your staff to work with them to get all this to leverage, because you can obviously quickly determine if we don't have these, we don't do, especially big projects. It just doesn't happen. So as you're talking to folks, the discussion of federal and state grants is a big thing right now. Just imagine if you take that out of here and what projects don't happen. Just think about that. That's catastrophic. So please continue to communicate and thank our folks for helping with that and to continue that. Appreciate you. Let me speak.
Next slide, like to always show a comparison from this fiscal year to the next proposed fiscal year. Once again, looking at it by category. And once again, you're going to just see increases almost across the board. So this current year in bridges, they have $2.8 million. Next year is 5.7. As we go through streets, it was 11.2 this year, up to 22.1, and then water pollution from 1.2 million to 13.3. So once again, the vast majority of this increases is specifically related to infrastructure. Next, we always show this slide, is a kind of a little bit of a deep dive into what that number means. So kind of across from fiscal year 24 and 25 into the projected 26. I like to show these as our street number kind of dips and as it kind of goes up and down over the years, you can see it's specifically related to grants. So that kind of those top rows are grant and special projects. So, 1 year we're having 9.3, then it dips to 1.4, then it jumps up to 12. Meanwhile, what I like to show is the city funds, is how much of the city funds are we doing? And that's our maintenance programs. And you can see over the years, we continue to fund those at very high levels. So even though we're moving into a very high year of overall street accounts, even when we hit a lower year because of the timing of some of these, we're still investing of city funds into our network.
Clay, the 3rd and 4th Street rehab, it was in 2024, but it's delayed, right? That's the big federal?
So yes, and that
Okay.
gets to...
Could you explain that to everybody?
Sure.
Because that came first in 2018.
Yes.
So everybody knows.
Yes, so that program is specifically through this Surface Transportation Block Grant, which is through the Federal Highway Administration. That's administered by our Bi-State Regional Planning Commission. And what Bi-State does is they help our communities project out into the future of what that funding source looks like. And specifically for 3rd and 4th, we were able to secure those funds in 2018, 2019 range, but they were not available because, we're projected out. When they become available, that's when we start the process of design. And you have to, I like to say, when you accept someone else's money, you accept their rules. And so that's the case with the federal government. There's a number of environmental processes and stuff that that we'd be required to go through to access that funding that we normally don't do on city projects. And so currently, right now, that's where you're seeing us move forward. And I'll also say, and then you have things like, I'll mention back to 53rd. 53rd Phase 1, which was Brady to Eastern, has been completed for almost 4 years now. But as your staff, we're still actually, that project's not closed out. We're going through the federal audit process to ensure we get every single dime that we're eligible to do. So I would say on average, some of these bigger projects, from the beginning all the way to the federal government considered closed out, it's 10 plus years. So it's a great question. And with that, that is all we have for the full summary. Does anyone have any questions before we dive into specific projects? Okay. Just give me one quick moment. I'm going to switch programs. Listen, moving my mouse. There we go. Okay. So now we're going to dive into it, and we're going to go alphabetical. So we'll hit airport, bridges, facilities, and just kind of go down the way. So next is Taxiway C reconstruction. So in the upcoming fiscal year in 26, we have $100,000 to leverage against a $400,000 of federal grants. So in particular, it's a $3.9 million project, with the vast majority of that coming through federal grants. Actually, I'm going to take a step back. I apologize. I'll describe exactly what we're looking at. So as we move forward, on your left hand of the screen, we'll describe the project, its funding, and what fiscal years that funding is. It will actually, if there's grant funding, it will designate city funds or state or federal funding, and what year, a total amount, and the map is generally indicating the location of a project or past or upcoming work as we move forward. So in the end, this will be over 3 fiscal years as we stack state and federal grant opportunities to reconstruct this particular taxiway. So I would, this would harken back to finance is looking at kind of the airport fund as a total, but this does not. This is our general obligation bonds is the local match for this. It is not debt associated with the airport itself or the airport fund. Next is bridge maintenance. I like to this particular slide. What you see on the right of the map, every single dot indicates a vehicular bridge in the city of Davenport. By state code, every 24 months, we conduct an inspection of all of these bridges. That inspection is extremely detailed and provides a list of either maintenance repair topics or ones that should be considered for reconstruction or rehabilitation. For maintenance purposes, we generally every other year, as you can kind of see, we put money in the budget. Fiscal year 27, $260,000. Over the 6 years is $700,000. I would like to say for the legend is what you see here. Everything that is orange is bridges that have received work since calendar year 2019. So in the last 6 years, we have done 5 major bridge projects, 4 maintenance projects. What's in green are the bridges that are located in the 6-year CIP, which that will be Eastern Avenue over Goose Creek, Eastern Avenue over Duck Creek, Wisconsin Avenue, and we'll go over those in particular. But from a maintenance standpoint, we already have a contract for work on Locust over CPKC. And then obviously we also have funding for our East 13th Street Bridge, which we are moving forward with. And this is part of.
We're seeing dots, but.
I know, this is part of the fun of live TV. Okay, let's roll with it then. So on your next slide, so we have a paper copy as you look in. So Eastern Avenue Bridge over Goose Creek South. That is a particular bridge we received a $1.5 million state grant on. We're going to leverage that against $1.4 million of city to fully reconstruct and raise that bridge. So as you can see on your map, it is the bridge that is on Eastern Avenue, just north of Kimberly. Yep, so you all have your slides. So Eastern Avenue Bridge over Duck Creek. So this particular one, $700,000 in year one, fiscal year 26, for to leverage against essentially $1.9 million federal grant. This is another one that was funded through the Surface Transportation Block Grant that's through Bi-State. So a $2.6 million project on a reconstruction of this particular bridge. One of the key aspects is when you look at your map, not only are we're going to raise this particular bridge so that just north of the bridge is an at-grade crossing for the Duck Creek Trail. We're actually going to put it, raise the bridge so that we can put an underpass underneath it so we can give safe access to avoid vehicular and pedestrian conflict points. And so that will also help with traffic, because we're going to, once that happens, we'll remove that traffic light that's there. Anyone that drives down Eastern, you get that one person, which is a good thing for safety purposes, that one person presses the button, traffic all stops at the light. With being able to provide, and we want people to use the underpass once it's built, we'll actually remove that light. That will help traffic flow. I've spoken to a number of you already. I'll talk to a number of you further about even options for narrowing this bridge. It's overbuilt, and then in general, as well as adding in a turn lane on Eastern to get onto 29th. I think that will all make traffic flow better. So, yes.
Can you talk about the timing of these two projects and when they're going to get started?
Yes, so we'll use this calendar year for design, and then it'll take the full year to walk through that design and environmental process, because they both have state and federal funds involved, and then we're looking into construction next year, so 2026.
2026.
Yes.
So I would just say this is one that, this is going to be a big traffic impact to the neighborhood, so a really solid communication plan so that people can plan out how they're going to change their routes. It's also going to push traffic to the west onto Jersey Ridge, and there's probably going to be a couple of pass-through streets that are going to see a lot of increased traffic, so potentially looking at those pass-through streets, try to get them patched or whatever, because just the way Eastern is, this will be a big impact. So I think communication is key, and then pre-planning.
Yes, these specifically Eastern over Duck Creek, because from a detour perspective, there's not much as you get there, and so that will certainly be a huge one, both in terms of for the neighbors, as well as our public safety officials as well, because that's a direct access to the hospital. So we will certainly work with them as we move forward in design. Next is Wisconsin Avenue over Duck Creek. So this is one where we put $250,000 in 2026 for design, and $900,000 in 27 for a $1.5 million state grant. We actually just received this, if I remember correctly, in December is when we were awarded this one. So this will be a great one as we move forward. Obviously last year in the second ward, we had 2 bridges that we replaced out there, so we continue to move forward on those. All right, so thank you very much for that brief moment. So next, South Clark Street Bridge replacement. So in 2029, we have design funds, and in 2030, money for reconstruction. Next, we're going to hit into our facilities, and I will not touch on all of these specific projects. I just want to showcase some of the work we have over the 6 years and talk about just very specific ones. So library, so of our 3 libraries that we have, you can see really what stands out is a roof replacement at Fairmount Library in 2026, as well as once that's completed, some interior painting for that particular facility as well. And then over the number of years, we continue to maintain those libraries.
How old is the Fairmount branch?
Oh, I'm going to look at Director Collins and see. 2006. Next, the one time I will jump out of order. Normally, so the CIP and the 6-year plan encompasses about 250 plus projects and programs. Obviously, we're not going to go over every single one of them. Typically, we don't highlight some of kind of the smaller based projects that normally most people don't see, but that are very critical to our operations. And this is one of them. So library services in that particular category, it's our materials program. So it's $465,000 that the city council allocates to the library as part of this, and this is so that they can buy materials for all three branches. I thought it was worthwhile to take a moment to talk about this because in our citizen survey, on our top rated services, number 2 was the quality of our library services is very good to good. And so obviously that starts with our staff, but also ensuring that we're providing the materials necessary that keeps people coming back that they see from a quality. So I asked Director Collins, just in 2024, what does that money get you? So it's about 22,931 items, including 18 different databases. In essence, it's a total borrowing value of over $8.7 million for our residents who go there. So you can just see the value that is, but that's some of the projects that are in your capital program that it's not the streets and bridges, but it has substantial amount of value, and clearly based on the findings from the community survey, people find that extremely worthwhile. So.
And I'll just add, as you've heard some of my speeches, reference what's going on in the environment at the state and city councils or others forcing what the discussions, there are discussions now of what to fund. There are cities that are not funding libraries. Okay, these are capital projects, but you're not gonna do capital projects if you don't have folks to do it, right? So our citizens, that's what the whole point is. Let the local folks decide what's important. Our local folks, through referendum to build the 2 libraries a few years ago, as Mr. Collins said, and all the citizens saying what's important, libraries are important. All these things are important to our cities. So anybody who's listening anywhere, understand, let the local folks decide what's important. I won't go any further. So, as you can see, these are important.
Next, as we run back into facilities, River's Edge, in the out years, we have both a roof replacement and skate-safe flooring at that facility. Next, you'll see a number of projects for Freight House and Union Station. They're right next to each other, so I figured would highlight both of those. Masonry repairs of Freight House is the big one for over $300,000 next year, along with about $100,000 of electrical repairs as we move forward. Next, our police station. The big project for next fiscal year is water mitigation. So that building is getting up there in age, and so we want to make sure we still have a quality facility. So specifically, as you can kind of see on this image, you can see that green-brown patch right there. When it was originally constructed, that was what they refer to as a green roof. Since that time, we've gotten a lot of different points of entry for water in that particular one. So this funding set aside, along with some funding set aside in this current year, is going to go to completely replace that and seal everything up. Actually, on the next council cycle, I'll have a design contract in front of you so we can get moving on that important project. Next, sticking with our friends at the police department, the police training center range. So located right next to the airport is a facility that they have that you can see on the screen that they have for live training. In order to use it for long-range rifle training, we need to encapsulate the building and perform a number of renovations to it. So this is an out-year project, as you can see, and then we're also going to be looking for some federal grant opportunities as well to hopefully leverage that, because we think that this can be a benefit not only to us, but to some of our surrounding community members as well, our community cities. Next, fire station. So the map obviously shows the location of all of our fire stations. And you can see over time, we're continuing to invest resources into those stations. The one I will point you to, the live fire training center refurbishment from $175,000 next fiscal year. That's specifically related to our training facility that is on the north part of the Public Works compound, and that's to realign some of the fire training building that they have so that they can do exercises along the way. So I know that's an important one for Chief and his training. Next is salt storage buildings. For our Public Works Department, we have two main locations where we store salt. Both one is at the riverfront at the Marquette facility, and another one is one large facility out at Public Works, and then several smaller ones surrounding at our Public Works. So about $650,000 next year to build a salt building. The one we will target for next year is the one at our Public Works facility, and then in the following year at the Marquette facility as well. Next, as we talk through Public Works, as you can see, there's a number of facility maintenance projects on here, none of them in fiscal year 26, but we just have them projected out there. For instance, HVAC control upgrades. In particular, we have a system now that's more of a proprietary system, and as we evaluate it each and every year, those maintenance costs continue to increase, as you would imagine with proprietary systems. So this would go back to something where more people can bid on, so we hopefully get competitive pricing, just as an example. Next is Auxiliary Services Site Phase 2. For this one, this would be building a new storage facility specifically for our public safety or our police department for evidence storage. As we move forward. So I like to show, so the image on the right is an old aerial, basically from 4 to 5 years ago, that shows you what the old Black Hawk Foundry site looked like. The image on your left actually shows what it looks like today if you looked at an aerial. So over the last few years, we've been renovating that. We took over control of that site, began renovating it. Our fire department has a storage facility out there, and then we've made upgrades along the way as well. So it looks much, much better than what it previously did in the larger photo.
I just want to say this is one that's got kicked down the road a ways, and that's okay. Our crews have been down there working to clean up the Brownfield Bridge, cleaning out trees.
Yep. We've gotten quite a bit of compliments from the neighbors of how we've been able to help clean up that particular site, which was, as you can see, was just in really, really terrible condition. Next is just a summary for fleet equipment purchases. So we have both in our operating budget and our capital for the replacement of all of our fleet. Some of the larger dollar items is what lives in the capital side. So the two great examples for that is our fire apparatuses. As Chief Carlson mentioned this fall when we were looking to purchase, the cost of a regular engine has gone up astronomically. I remember probably 5-6 years ago, we were at $550,000 for an apparatus. Now we're over $950,000 from a 12-month lead time from when you ordered it to a 36-month lead time as we ordered it. So we want to continue to ensure that we have the equipment and the vehicles necessary for the services we provide. And so the CIP provides that. So $950,000 for fire apparatus and engines. Another one is solid waste program, $890,000. So that is somewhat of a contained funding source. So we're able to have a very good replacement schedule for recycling and garbage. Just to once again reiterate our community survey, the quality of garbage and recycling was actually number 3. So library was number 2, garbage and recycling was number 3 at 87%. So we want to continue to keep that high.
I want to draw attention to one thing, the hazardous materials vehicle. As you talk to folks, as I talk to folks, the number one thing I talk to folks is the water pollution control point. The other thing that's really needed big time, I know it's not till 28 here in ours, but if we can get money to help with that, we are the hazardous reaction team, our fire department, for this whole side of the state. So that's a big need. I just want to draw attention so people hear it as you talk to folks. That vehicle's huge.
And that's a great, 100% agree. And I know we have a consultant in DC who helps us identify some of these grant opportunities and promote those grant opportunities amongst the federal agencies. This is one of our key projects for the next year, if not more, as we continue to work to see what avenues we can help to help us pay for this particular one. Next is the general government section or category of our particular presentation. The first one we're going to look at is the Urban Revitalization Program. Specifically, that's what funds our DREAM program as we move forward. So a little over $1.1 million in fiscal year 26, even I think a little over $7 million across the 6 years. So this program started in 2019, and the map on the right hand shows all the locations that have been successful projects. So everything in orange were projects selected in calendar year 2024. Green, now over the years, we've been able to add different funding mechanisms that are not just through the CIP. So think ARPA is a great example. So you have Dream Plus, you have Extreme Dream, and then obviously the ones in blue have been completed over the number of years. Director Berger, I don't know if he's here right now, but him and his team gave me some numbers just for some ideas. Starting in 2019, rounds 1 through 5, we had over 205 projects of city funding, 2.78 million. CDBG funding, we've been able to leverage at about 1.5 for a total of over $4.3 million of investment as we move forward. And they already have round 6 of almost $700,000 to $800,000 of projects already planned. So.
This is something I've asked before. It'd be cool if anybody could ever put together some data that shows kind of the return on that investment that we received as far as increased property values in those areas. Do we have decreased abandonment of homes? Do we have increased turnover? Say, homes selling faster? You guys need to use the mics. I know that's a pretty deep dive and a lot of info.
The other thing I would add to that is the improvements in surrounding, the things we don't pay for, but a neighbor sees something and it sort of has that kind of effect. And that might all could come through the assessor, honestly, because I think we've all seen that when there's one dream, then somebody else does something. I think the assessor could help with that, maybe.
And then we can also look at the number of permits pulled over time in a surrounding neighborhood. I know anecdotally, we've heard people say that a few of their neighbors were participants in the program, and so that kind of kickstarted them to want to do something of their own. And so we can certainly dive into that data and get back to you for sure. Next is the Occupational and Wellness Center Clinic. This particular one, it's $1 million in next year's budget. I would like to point out specifically, so this is funded in a unique manner. So it's not with our general obligation bonds or local sales tax. 75% of it is through our health fund. 25% of it is through our risk fund. And that's because as our HR team, as they do on an annual basis, but over time, they're constantly looking at cost containment strategies for an overall when it comes to healthcare. This is one that's particularly there, and I think over time can then pay back this and then continue to hopefully have some cost savings for the overall fund. It also will offer some operational efficiencies in terms of getting some of our employees some of the assistance that they're looking for, so they're not waiting 2, 3, 4 hours at a time at a clinic. So, forward. Next, as we continue, so the land use sub-area growth plan. So, as everyone knows, we have an $18 million construction project for the Creek Sewer Extension project. That's the blue line on the map. As it continues to start heading west, we had a successful year 1. We're getting ready to head into year 2. That project is scheduled to be completed in March of 2026. So ahead of our initial schedule for construction. As we move forward into that, we understand that the primary driver of what economic development looks like in areas where there's wide open fields is they want to know if there's sanitary connection. So obviously this is the primary one. What we're looking for with this particular project is so that we can start the planning of what this potential areas could look like, both in terms of zoning, in terms of economic development. You're also going to have additional infrastructure. For instance, roadways, sewer connections to the interceptor sewer. And then some of that information is what can help drive that we can then give to prospective people who are interested in coming and investing in our community, and so that we can be more knowledgeable and we can hopefully be more competitive right out of the gate. So on your left, as you sit there, is kind of a little idea of a plan of how we can potentially break some of these pieces up. Because right now, if you look at it, it is just farm field. So this is hopefully to move that forward. So it's $150,000 next year to pair with some funding that we have this year to get that full plan. And honestly, it's It's another contract I have waiting to go, that's looking to probably put in front of you next council cycle, with the idea it would be great to have that planning chance be completed before December of this year, so that we have that locked in ahead of construction being completed of this project. One of the things of a long-term project is it getting close to completion. We want to make sure that we take advantage of that and we don't waste time. The next is our comprehensive plan update. So this is another out-year project, 2030, $250,000. What you see on the right is kind of the zoning map of the city. We did a partial plan update in 2016 for the 2035 program. This is, to me, a great example of our 6-year plan. We're projecting that, just to let everyone know, we would like to update that as we get closer and closer. Obviously, as the years go on, the needs of our city kind of morph and shift over time, and it's making sure that we stay in tune with that. Next, as we go into multimodal transportation, this is Civic Access Program. I know we talked about this a little on Wednesday. So this is ADA ramps. So this is both the repair and the construction of new ADA ramps throughout the city. So about $250,000 next year, almost $250,000 throughout every single year for the 6-year plan. What you see there is some of the ramps that you've seen we've completed over the years, probably the next 6 to 8 years. So continuing that every single year as we move forward. The next one is Creating Connections program. So this is the program in which we fund sidewalk repair and sidewalk construction. We offer a residential cost share program that it's 50-50. Obviously, the repair of someone's sidewalk is the property owner's responsibility. This is a very popular program that we have because the city, to try to advance fixing sidewalks, we do offer that 50-50. So $600,000 in next fiscal year and about $3.2 million over the 6-year plan. This particular program, once again, we're getting ready to bid out very, very soon. So it'll come in front of you so we can take advantage of the spring and summer. So, and then once again, I love to show these graphs, these maps, because it can show you how much it's utilized throughout the entire city. Okay. As we continue through multimodal, we're going to start talking about our trail system. So recreational path reconstruction program. So every other year, we put funding aside to fix our existing trail system. So in fiscal year 26, we have $150,000 set aside. Through the full 6 years, it's $550,000. What's green on the map? So currently, that's our existing trail system. What's green are the pieces of our trail systems that we've either did a mill and overlay project or resurfacing or full reconstruction. A lot of usage over the years on our Duck Creek system to the west. We've been able to work, but also we've done work on the east end of our Riverfront Trail and our Goose Creek Trail Phase 1. Next, as we're looking forward, is the West Loop Phase 2. So as we look to expand our system, our trail system is heavily utilized. It's one of, and Director Dyson would tell you, it's something that a lot of people enjoy. So as we look to expand that system so more people can continue to enjoy that, it's through projects like this. So West Loop Phase 1 is a project that you can see in blue. So it's actually where the current Duck Creek system ends at Emice. It'll go all the way down to Locust Street and all the way to Wisconsin. We actually get that project back from the DOT. They're bidding it on our behalf because there's federal funding involved. We get that back this month. So hopefully to put something in front of you in March for construction of this year. What's in our current proposed 26 budget is Phase 2. Phase 2 actually builds off of that, takes it from Locust Street all the way down to West 11th. There's some pretty significant neighborhoods in that area. This will give them access to our Duck Creek Trail system as we move forward. One of the things I would like to note as we continue to expand our system, you'll notice a theme, and that theme is it's never fully city funds that do this. So our West Loop Phase 2 was over $500,000 Phase 1 was about $500,000. Phase 2, you can see in here that is over, if I'm looking at this, about $550,000 of that is through a federal grant. So we're always looking to leverage our resources and not just use city monies to pay for this stuff.
I'm sorry.
I have a quick question. So where Locust and Wisconsin meet, that's a pretty
Yep.
risky intersection
So we'll put a pedestrian signal.
at 45 miles an hour? Or is that where it drops right there? But, I mean, it's a higher rate of speed
Yes.
right there, so is that pedestrian signal going to be enough?
So as we look forward, yeah, we have pedestrian signals in other areas of the city that also, and that I don't recall the speed limit on that particular section, but I can.
Jumps to, I think, 45 right there.
Okay. Yep.
As you're coming back in, it hits the 35 just after Wisconsin coming back in.
Mm-hmm.
But that, I know that intersection is, we've had several accidents. I don't know how many,
Yep. No, we can pull those numbers.
pretty significant when they do happen.
Yep. And speed. Okay.
There's probably not too much opportunity. Obviously, everything's at grade, so you'd have to create over grade crossing if you're gonna do something other than.
Correct. If you wanted to, if we want to create a eliminate an at-grade crossing, it'd be a pedestrian bridge. Since there's no way underneath. Yeah, it's all flat through
I
there.
didn't know if we were possibly thinking of an actual traffic light, or something to that effect.
So the intersection itself doesn't, if I remember correctly, doesn't warrant a traffic light, but then that's where you get the pedestrian light. So if you have someone, if I'm sitting there, you press the button, and then the light will turn red, and then that way it'll stop traffic, much as what we're talking about what happened at Eastern and Duck Creek, excuse me. But yep, happy to look at those numbers. Next is Goose Creek Phase 4. So this is one that is not in the 26 budget, but is projected out. So in 2027, $150,000 for design work. And in 2028, $400,000 of city funds to match a $1.5 million of a federal grant. Looking at the system as a whole is how I like to look at it, because incremental progress over time is what gets us to what we're looking for. So the map you're looking at, green is the existing system, blue is the ARPA-funded trail that's currently just started construction, and that blue links the green to the green at 46, because just under 53rd of Goose Creek, and I can try to get this right here, from roughly where my mouse is here all the way to 59th. That was a trail that was completed 2 years ago using federal funding. What's in yellow is the Veterans, what we refer to as the Veterans Trail Extension, that will link the Goose Creek Trail as an off-street 10-foot path to the Veterans Trail system. So the idea is that in the end, you can then safely, with the ARPA trail, get underneath Kimberly, go all the way up. You can go underneath 46, underneath 53rd. You're off of Brady, so it's a trail system until you link up to Veterans Trail. Veterans Trail then links up all the way to, you can go to our neighbors to the east, to the Betplex, or hit the, I believe, Devil's Glen. Devil's Glen actually goes all the way down to the river. So once again, expanding the access system. And even if you want to go further back to West Loop, you can, like someone can start then off of those West Loop, use the Duck Creek Trail, get on the Goose Creek Trail to then connect to the Veterans Trail. And we're trying to also, to Alderman Burkhart's point, when we can, eliminate those at-grade crossings for our residents. So. Next, as we go into our Parks and Recreation, we have the EMICE Clubhouse. So this is a newer project as we move forward. So this is a renovation or a new clubhouse at EMICE Golf. And this is both to increase what we currently have there, as well as work with one of our partner organizations at First Tee. So this is a great example of a community partner. So First Tee has actually already, has already secured about $300,000 of funding for this particular project. We're looking to help leverage that $1 million of city money into $1.5 million of other private investment. So, and I do know that Director Dyson and his team is working directly and in hand with First Tee, and they do have a lot of grant opportunities ready to go as we move forward into the spring.
Next, Credit Island Park improvements. So starting, I think it was 2 fiscal years ago, we started putting funds basically almost every other year in the CIP to start doing major renovations to Credit Island. So you'll see in next fiscal year, we have $300,000 set aside, and then about $500,000 set aside over the 6-year plan to continue those investments. One of the ones you can look at was the new playground that's out there, was a previously funded project. To the road. So that is one that will be a spring project. You'll have a public hearing for fixing the roadway coming in front of you fairly soon. One of the grant opportunities that we're continuing to look at is ways in which we could maybe do a bridge or culvert system to help through the water flow. And we have several things out with the Army Corps of Engineers. At the one particular grant in particular, we've scored the highest the last 2 years in the Corps' district. They just haven't received funding for that particular grant program. So if they were to receive funding, we would be the first one, but we're also looking at different opportunities as well.
This is the causeway in.
Correct. Yes, ma'am. This would be the causeway. Yes, sir.
I'd just like to say I'm a big proponent of us aggressively pursuing an alternative to the current causeway. Just because every time it floods, it gets wiped out and then we lose access to Credit Island. I think Credit Island's a very important park in the city of Davenport, and if it's ever going to be the park that it should be, we need to give it access that isn't going to be wiped out anytime it floods. And so I know that there's good opportunity with the Corps of Engineer. I know in other times, Mayor, when we have asked our federal delegation to look at specific projects, they've been helpful in maybe pushing funding towards them. So maybe this is one that we need to push to our delegation a little bit more to see if we can get some funding.
Next So next we have in year 2, in 2027, excuse me, no, I was there, Northwest, I'm sorry. All right, in 2027, $250,000 for improvements to Northwest Park. This is specifically related to increasing some parking in this particular one, along with some amenity upgrades. Next, we have Vanderveer Stone Fountain. This is $700,000 in year 2, so 2027, for renovations of that facility. There's current funding in this particular year for design of what this looks like. We've actually, because of the historic nature of the fountain and the just very, very specialty work that it goes into, we actually released an RFP, or request for proposal, for engineering services for this, and actually didn't get anyone. So we're actually reaching out to a number of, we're doing our own research and reaching out to a number of specialized firms to hopefully get someone under contract to figure out what the specific repair would be, this would be the funding for. Next is our aquatic facilities. So we have 2, February Aquatic Center and Annie Whitmire. So in 2027, $500,000, 28, $200,000, and in fiscal year 30, another $500,000. This would be including a climbing wall, replacement of spray features, new splash pads, and some equipment for disinfection of upgrading. The next one is our park development program. So every year it receives an annual allocation of $350,000 for a total of about $2.1 million over the 6 years. This is an interesting program in that the Park Advisory Board provides comments to Director Dyson and his team on what some improvements can be made. He then shares that with the council. I believe the voting has already occurred for the fiscal year 26. And you can kind of see over time, I think that they've done a really great job of spreading it throughout the community. We have a lot of parks in our system, and they're constantly making improvements to those parks using funds such as this. Next is our playground replacement program. So this one is scheduled to receive funding in fiscal year 28 at $170,000, and fiscal year 2030 at $170,000, and this is for larger scale playgrounds. as we move forward. I'm going to look to Director Dyson. I think a normal playground is around 85,000, and then so.
I don't know. You hear me? Typical neighborhood playground's around 80,000. So this looks to our community parks to do a larger, to serve a larger radius. So these would fund like Duck Creek, Northwest, Prairie Heights, some of the larger community parks.
Yep. So one of the reasons on the map here shows the location of all of our playgrounds throughout our park system. What's in orange is what, when Director Dyson came aboard, we had an aggressive approach of replacing a lot of our playgrounds. So you can see what we've done in orange. In yellow is what funded through ARPA. So we were able to augment those city funds with ARPA funding and able to get a substantial amount done through ARPA. So that's kind of why you saw this is kind of pushed out just a little bit, because we've completely caught up with ourselves as we move forward.
Director Dyson, I used to complain quite a bit to you about the quality of play structures that we were putting in through this program, and the ones that you've done recently are very high quality, and I just appreciate you listening to that feedback and making an improvement.
Next, as we move forward, hard surface repair program. So this is a new one that we have in the 6-year, $250,000 every other year starting in 2026. So the map represents the location of essentially where our courts are on within our park system, both in terms of basketball courts or pickleball courts, and this just ensures that we continue to maintain those. Yes, ma'am.
Question, so since we're on Parks and Recs, I don't see that we have anything set aside for future plans with junior theater or facility or anything like that. I know we just recently approved a contract, but it's an interim temporary location.
Yes.
So where does that fall in to our future planning?
Let me take it? Okay. So I believe, and I'm looking sideways to make sure I don't overspeak myself. I think we'll have a conversation coming up about some, for the temporary system would possibly be in our ARPA interest funding. From a permanent location, I think before we put a dollar value or something in the CIP, I think we are going to get a more defined, we're going to work through this year and getting a defined scope of what that might be so that we can then start building that into future year budgets. But right now, there isn't, and once again, I've not been super involved with the permanent one, but there isn't a defined scope of where the location's going to be, of what the cost is for us to build into a 6-year plan.
Temporary one. We're moving into the school. I don't need the microphone.
Okay, so the question.
I'll interrupt. The microphone's not for us. The microphone is for the people out there. When you just go back there, you can't
Great.
hear us talk. That's all.
Okay.
No
What
disrespect.
about the current facility we're working on now?
Correct, and that's going to be in an upcoming conversation with the ARPA interest funds.
Perfect.
Yep.
Just brief follow-up on the permanent one. I know we don't have anything, but we're talking about continuing to keep the options open and working to find something. My question is more so in terms of planning, and this was asked last year when we were at budget. Are we in a position to be able to do so if we find a location? And that's really the question, and where would it come? Would it be a similar situation like Fire Station 3 where borrowed against ourselves and then paid it off within a year? That's really kind of what I'm asking, just to ensure that we're adequately planning in advance.
Yep, and I will have that written down so when we do follow-ups. Yep. Next, as we cross from Parks and Recreation into Public Safety, I will harken back to our community survey. Our top priority from a community standpoint and community issues was public safety at #1. And so this particular set of projects continues to ensure that they have both our police and fire, that they have the equipment that they need to perform the services that we're asking them to do. So you'll see a whole host of things from turnout gear replacement, $100,000 in next year's budget for our fire team, to both their rescue and equipment, as well as ballistic helmets for PD. Something as simple as squad car router replacement to ensure that their services and operations continue to move forward. And then in the out years, you can see some of the bigger dollar items such as body cameras, and probably like 4 or 5 years out.
So just real quick, the chemical testing equipment. I'm assuming that's for PD, for testing when they go into places for like drugs, all the different things they run across.
Yes.
Wouldn't that be something we want to, for 73,000, move up and not wait till 2028, especially in this type of environment we're living in these days?
I'll touch base with our PD team. I believe that was the year in which they asked for it, but I'll verify to make sure that we are on a schedule. Yep. Do a follow-up. Next is, as we get into Riverfront, as we work our way down, so our flood resiliency program. Our Protect grant is located elsewhere, but our flood resiliency program has, over the years, since we have completed the resiliency plan, has been what we've been put in place to fund our structural solutions. And so, and structural solutions can be both improvements to the existing system or repairing what we have in our existing system. And that's the location of what you see on the map. This is what we funded. So in this case, you'll see 3 dots down by Walnut Creek and Black Hawk Creek. We've done a number of projects that were much needed to do to repair the infrastructure that was there. This particular funding source over previous fiscal years helped also fund our grant match to grants such as River and Marquette, or even give us some extra dollars needed for our primarily ARPA-funded project at 3rd and 4th between Cary on River Drive. So as we start working through our Protect grant, which is a different slide, you'll see that the structural solution funds are in 2028 to 2031 for a total of $3 million. Our non-structural program out in year 6 for $500,000. I know there's been questions about having a flood work, what do we call it? Work study, work session. Thank you. Director Gleason and I have started to gather all the questions that were had, all the information, and we're gonna start preparing a comprehensive memorandum with everything that the council requested following that previous one, and we can present it. We think providing that in a large one document for everyone, and then we can make sure that we're covering everything that you're looking for and needing. And then once that happens, then we can have the work session and then go over all the information and ask it. So we have that scheduled tentatively in the spring as we work through gathering all that information for you to have all at the same time before the work session occurs.
So this will look at our plan, what we've done to date, what's projected, what's left. You know, once that document's done, it certainly would, I think in the city's website, you know, because I go and look at the plan, but, you know, and we have wonderful documentation of the other grants we've gotten, but to have something that says, here's where we are right now with all of this, I think would be incredibly helpful because people are picking up on this at certain points, you know. So
it'll be comprehensive in the sense that
that'll
it'll be
be
a
really
lot
good
of
for the
reading. So
public
we
too.
want to make sure we get that to you well in advance. So if there's follow-up questions, we can do those prior to then you being able to all have a conversation and having basically on the same sheet of music from an information and data perspective.
So I'm assuming at some point with all this work that we're doing and projecting to do, our flood plan is actually in our flood fighting abilities or how we protect city assets, that's going to change.
I think that'll be part of the conversation.
Thank you.
Next, are we good? Do we need a break or anything? Do you need a break or anything? Are we good? Carry on? Okay. So next, we're going to get into our sanitary program. This is my personal favorite as we move forward. It's the things that you don't see, but they're as just important as everything else. So our next couple slides represent some programs that we have. Our contract sewer repair program, so $1.2 million, or $1.25 million, excuse me, in fiscal year 26. It carries throughout the full 6 years for over $7.8 million. This represents when we have an emergency sewer repair that needs to be done. These are the funds that we use for that. We have a number of contracts ready to go so that if one contractor calls and they can't make it, we can call others. We also use this when we're aware of point repairs in the system that proactively needed to be So if we've done all of our emergency ones, we can go out there and proactively do it. And that's what this program does. And you can see the location of those since 2013 throughout the city.
Can you just explain the benefit to the homeowner? Because we didn't have this program before.
I would love to, but if I can go to the next slide, is our sewer lateral repair program. So I would say, from my perspective, this is the most popular program we have at the city. It's fantastic. It essentially offers, if you have a lateral that is broken or needs repair, what the city does is offer you a program. It's a $500 deductible, and then the city will cover the remaining costs up to $10,000 for that repair. We have, once again, multiple contractors on hand that can perform this work. Sometimes you can actually, as a homeowner, you can actually pick which one you want through this, and we bid it every year. You're gonna probably tired of hearing me saying this. The next round is gonna come up in front of you for public hearing in the next cycle or two for our next round. So once again, you can see just based on the map how much this program is used by our community. And that $1.2 million that we have programmed every year is absolutely used every single year. So it's in a lot of it in the Ober neighborhoods. And this, I mean, you think, and then one of the things that staff is going to come in front of you, we're always evaluating what that threshold looks like, that up to $10,000. So naturally, we're all seeing increases in cost. So where once that was near the very high, now the average is creeping up to that per location. And so we're looking through that and examining it, and we may come up to you at some point to think if we need to increase that, because this is, when it comes to our sewer system, our overarching goal is the removal of inflow and infiltration, so I&I in the system. And this is a great way of removing that. So I do know we've had a number of cities reach out to us, curious of how we run it, because they're looking at implementing it in their own cities. So huge program.
Just to remember, before we did this, the astronomical bills to hundreds and hundreds, if not thousands of people, this took that away from them.
Yep. So instead of something happening and maybe we didn't know about it and all this other stuff is because people maybe, couldn't afford it or however, now we're proactive in hearing about these things and we can go out and fix them. Yep.
It's the greatest call you can get and answer you can give. It's like you just made somebody's year.
Yes.
It's very exciting for people when they hear they have help. It really is.
The next program, so we've changed up how we're doing our sewer system over the years. So going back 10 plus years, we've producing a lot of studies. Those studies create projects for the removal and I&I. Over the years, we've actually completed a lot of those studies that were done 10, 15 years ago. We're now to the point where we can create new ones. So we've actually kind of set up a new architecture for that. And it's what you see. So the SSES program is a sanitary sewer and evaluation study. So they go through and then they look at condition of the pipe. They do smoke testing. We do metering. We try to find out where I&I is happening in the system. And we've specifically targeted a number of sewer basins where we've had known issues. So Silver Creek, which is the green sewer basin on the map, and then the blue is Robin Creek, and then the orange is North Park. North Park and Robin, Brian, our city engineer, and I are expected to receive that draft recommendation this upcoming week, so we can see what those reports are. Silver Creek is expected to come in at the end of this month, and I believe in front of you on this council cycle is for us to start the process for Goose and Caterpillar, which are the two adjoining ones up there. So the ideas we have is we never want to get into the situation where we were previously, where we spend all this money on studies that says we need to spend $50, $60 million. We don't have those resources, so it takes forever to do those things. So we want to try to do it in a very smart and logical manner. We want to go in there. We're going to find what is the best benefit cost for the city to perform those projects. There's no sense in doing a $4 million project that provides little benefit. So we're going to go in there in these basins and start doing those. You do an SSES, that rolls into design then rolls into construction. And while those are happening, you're then starting the process again. So we're constantly having a flow. And that then rolls into our rehabilitation program. So this is the funding source used to then do the construction of that work. So once again, a substantial amount of money in 2026 of about $2.4 million over $16 million over a 6-year plan. The map, this is my favorite map of all of them, is the one on the right. Everything shows since, I believe since 2016 to maybe 2015, of the amount of sewer work we've done in the city. The blue dots represent the rehabilitation of manholes. The lines represents lining program that we do to provide structural integrity to the pipe that also reduces I&I into the system. And then the larger blue dots are direct I&I connections being removed from the system. We live in a historic city. We have storm sewers that connected into the sanitary sewer system. It's just a fact. So we are going to systematically go through and remove those. The biggest one happened a number of years ago is the 1930s Interceptor project. It was specifically mandated in our DNR consent order, and that removed a substantial amount of flow from our, it basically stopped the river getting into our system, which led to going down to the plant. We turn in an annual report to the DNR on a regular basis. They are very happy with the progress we've made. One of the things, I'm gonna echo something that the mayor has said very often, some other cities, when the DNR consent orders were coming down, maybe the city of Clinton, they chose to fight it, and they were basically provided unfunded mandates to do substantial dollar value increases. We were able to work with the DNR, said, hey, because they're focused on the plant. That's their primary determination. We said, can we take that money and actually fix it in the system? That provides benefit to our users and our residents and our communities, but then also provides benefit at the plant. Because if we can eliminate the source from getting to the plant, then that helps us move forward. So they've been extremely happy with the progress we've made. That's why this is the best program. Next is, as we look forward, in front of you on this council cycle is a pilot program for neighborhood I&I investigation. As we do all of the research to correct I&I in the public system, we do need to acknowledge that there is I&I coming into the private system. Industry standards will generally tell you, so if our chief engineer were to come up here, he would tell you about 70% of I&I comes through the private side. It's sump pumps that's tied into your laterals, or it's your roof drains. A lot of it is in our older neighborhoods because that was an accepted practice. What we've done is there's the system that's right in front of you right now is 18th and Marlowe area. We've had known issues when we have even moderate rains as it comes to there. So we have lined those particular sewers. We have fixed them along the way, and we're still having issues. So in our mind, it's not necessarily from the public system, so we're gonna use this area as a pilot program to see if we can gather data to then to say that it may or may not be coming from the private. And if it's coming from the private, then staff will put together a recommendation for all of you that we may be, and I'm forecasting here, so please don't hold me to it, but we're probably gonna come in front of you with a sewer lateral style program to then try to, provide incentives to people to remove that from it, because it does provide benefit to the public system if we can remove that I&I. So this is kind of a step one, and that's 100. So we have funding this fiscal year, and this kind of keeps it moving a little bit until we have a defined scope and a defined program.
Can I ask a question on the previous?
Yes.
So we've got the completed projects for 2024 and past completed projects.
Yes.
Are there any for this year
So
that we're recognizing and addressing?
So this year it comes back. We're waiting to get those draft reports back for those three basins up here in the SSES program. So that Silver Creek, Robin, those are probably produced projects, yes. It's a great question. Next, as we go into our stormwater conveyance system, Goose Creek Park is $700,000 in 2026 for stabilization of a creek out on the northwestern section of town. This is in combination with some grant funds. We actually, our clean water manager, Amy Kay, she's been able to get about 5 or 6 different funding opportunities to then leverage. So once again, this isn't all city funds going into this. We're able to leverage different state and other opportunities. Next is Eastern Avenue as we go through. So this is, I included this, so this has, in 26, we're gonna have design funds of $60,000 with about $360,000 over 2 years. This is a great one. So what you see on the map is what's in green is the sewer system. What's in purple is the storm sewer system. So basically the purple kind of around this particular area, you can see it kind of goes in and out and behind people's homes. There's no good access points. So, and the sewer is becoming in poor condition. So what we would do is we would basically drop it along within the right of way. So we would build a new storm sewer system there. Next is Valley Drive sump pump abatement, another program along Valley Drive. So this is in the out years, so about $540,000. We have substantial flooding during even light to moderate rains here because there is no storm sewer in the area. So this would be the installation of storm sewer so that we can remove those from the street. Next, any questions before we move into streets? Okay, we good to go, sir?
Yep.
Okay. So as we move into our street network, so we'll hit our programs first and then followed by our grant projects. So we divide two large programs for both high volume and neighborhood. High volume is both our arterials and our collector roadways. So in 2026, $4.6 million. Across the 6-year plan, about $27.1 million. Once again, it's the familiar consistency theme that on the map to your right showcases the number of projects that have been completed since 2015 across the city. And then we have some, what's in orange is what we're proposing for this year. And once again, I will get you a full list of those early next week. Highlights of those is Grand, essentially from 29th to Locust. We also have a section of Main that's from 17th to 12th, and then we have a number of mill and overlay projects kind of scattered throughout the city, as well as some a fairly large full depth patching project at the intersection of 53rd and Elmore. Okay. The next set of projects that we have are our neighborhood street program. We break those up into two different kind of subcategories. First is what we contract out to our contracting community, and then next is what we have for in-house capabilities. From a contract standpoint, so I've rolled the dollar value in there completely, so you'll see about $4.4 million. $3 million of that is contract. The rest of it goes for material purchases and equipment for our in-house crews. So as we move forward, you can see this program was actually started in 2019. So this was something that Director Gleason actually championed as we move forward. Beforehand, we did not have this in our program, which was a huge gap in our system. And how do we address these large-scale projects? Some of these can go from $250,000 to some we've done is as high as $700,000 to $800,000 street replacement projects. So once again, $4.4 million next year, $21 million over the 6-year plan. And then from a kind of identification of some top streets for next year, like Kimberly Downs and Bridge is some. Torrey Pines is one that I know Alderman Jovian and I have been talking about for a number of years. 61st Street near Appomattox. There's sections out in Northwest Davenport and Oak and West 56 as well. Next is the in-house portion. So you can see on the right in blue is what's been accomplished since roughly 2015, and then you can see what's projected in 2026. So currently out, right, same funding source or same funding amount. An interesting one to note, especially as Alderman Dunn and I were talking earlier this week, we have another program that's contract milling that we have as well that's currently out to bid. And it's where we contract out the milling operations of that. And so that's $200,000 every year. And that's an efficiency upgrade for our operation. So we can do more. Okay. Next is alley repair program. So you are all familiar with our alley assessment program. In the last few years, we've actually tweaked the percentage. It used to be a 50-50 residential. I believe it's 75-25 now. And we did that along with kind of tweaking some of the kind of interview process to get this on the list to try to see if we can encourage more. And I believe that's worked. So in blue is what we've done over the last few years, $600,000 next year. And that's for the two projects that you see in orange here.
Like, we reduced the percentage, right?
Correct.
To 30?
I think it's 25.
25.
Yep, so it's less on a property owner than it used to be, and I think that's also encouraged participation along the way, because we used to see
Right.
maybe one a year,
Yeah.
and now we have two this year, but we've generally been seeing to the tune of 4 to 6.
Okay. Thank
Next is we'll get into this is our Protect grant as we move forward. So as we go forward, so in 2026, $1.5 million of city funds to leverage over $7 million from the federal government. And then in 2027, another $1.5 million to complete it at the 4.6. So a little over $14.6 million for the project. And that's so we're actually part of our current amended budget. We've got some funding set aside already for design work. So this is just moving that particular project forward. The goal is to create a flood detour route, essentially from Rockingham all the way to Marquette up to 3rd and 4th, 3rd and 4th to East River Drive out to Bettendorf, up to River Stage 22. And that's both road raises at 3rd and LeClaire, at River and Mound, at 2nd and Gaines, as well as some on Rockingham and Marquette. And then we also have street repair as part of this too. So that's the Rockingham that you see on the far west side, as well as some reconfigurations of some intersections as well.
So the far west on Rockingham is not raising, that's not required raising there, is that correct? It's repair?
Correct, it's just
Right.
repair. So this was one of the, as you dive into the various requirements of a grant, you can look to see what they're looking for. And sometimes along the way, you can fit projects in that kind of help it. And so repair of Rockingham was one that we thought we would help our scoring system, and it actually did. And so that was, we really put it in there, even though it's not a road raise.
And the others are slight raises, right?
Correct. In some instances, 2.5 feet. Yep. Yes, sir.
I just want to again say thanks to you and the respective staff for keeping perseverance here. We've been out to DC a couple times, and these grants are extremely hard to get, but your work and others to get this. And remember, as we talk about the environment, with grants right now in the nation, just think if this wouldn't have happened, this Protect grant, both at the water pollution control point and these. So thank you.
Yep. So to Alderman McGinnis's point previously, when we put out that comprehensive memo, this will talk about how we were able to advance our projects forward. And our plan was built in a flexible manner to allow us to take advantage of opportunities like this should they arise, and lucky for us, they did. Next, we're going to get into the specific street locations for more grants. So in West 53rd, so there's two particular sections. Basically, you go from Brady to the bridge over Candlelight Creek, and then Northwest Boulevard all the way to Pine. This is full reconstruction. This is a great example of what we were talking about with Alderman Newton. Some of these are out in future years, but we have been awarded this through Bi-State, through that Surface Transportation Block Grant Program. And it's essentially about an $8.1 million federal grant to help us with this $11 million project.
A lot of people talk about 53rd and how bad it is. So again, not to keep repeating this, imagine if this would not happen, meaning this grant is taken away.
To the mayor's point, think our arterial program budget is $4.6 million a year. This is an $11 million project in one particular point in the city. So it's great that we're able to leverage our resources against what's available at the federal level. Next, as we're getting close, West Central Park. So in fiscal year 26, we have $1.1 million to leverage against a $2.6 million federal grant for about a $3.7 million project. The design of this roadway, we've just approved the design, and something I'm going to hopefully put in front of you in the next week or two is a memo that's provides some recommendations for potentially narrowing this particular roadway. It's a 4-lane road with a 10-foot travel lanes, which is below standards. And so we would like to make some recommendations to the council. I've spoke to the affected ward alder people already, and they're interested in the conversation of us moving this forward. Next, as we get into the traffic engineering, I would say one of the things that I talk most often with most of you on is the speeds in which people travel in our city and how we can try to mitigate that. if our chief engineer was here, he would tell you there's 3 different E's. There's the education component of how to mitigate it. Education typically takes 2 people. You can tell people all day about something. They have to be willing to listen and then adapt. There's the enforcement perspective. Chief Beladle, I don't want to speak for him, but I know his team has a hefty load on them already, and that's difficult to do from a consistency standpoint. And then you have engineering, and that's a way we can either make some temporary or physical alterations to roadways to encourage people to drive slower, essentially. So a few years ago, we instituted the traffic calming program, and this can be a whole host of factors. Speed bumps is generally the ones most people focus on, because that's a physical thing that we can put into the street. But we've also done other things like speed indicator signs, which we have data to prove that actually slows people down. I know I was able to work with a number of you last year to put some up. I think we've seen some good success. We have some other ones that we're putting also. I know Alderman Tim Dunn and I were talking through, if I always mess this one up, Wisconsin and Kimberly on some maybe putting in kind of a different kind of system there, and we have that stuff on order and hopefully get it in the spring. So once again, this will be a constant conversation amongst all of us about what we can do. Some things we can do per the MUTCD, which is the Manual of Uniform Traffic Control, but there are other things that if one set of tools doesn't work, we'll try another set as well. So this is a $75,000 in fiscal year 26 for about $600,000 over the 6-year program. Part of that is also implementing specific projects. So putting in a traffic signal at Brady and 12th Street has been one that has been heard often. We were actually in the last stages to the point where we're comfortable enough to put it in the budget. We haven't gotten formal approval from the state, but we do believe we can get up to $88,000 from the state to help pay for a traffic light at this intersection. So, excuse me, and there's $72,000 of city funds to help balance off that grant. Yes, sir.
On Harrison, if we're talking, 16th, and is it Harrison? 16th, that it's still a point of contention for me in my ward as far as safety, and we're talking about lights and pedestrian lights. I would love to look into something like that for my neighborhood.
Okay. Let me follow up as part of our follow-up memo and get back to you.
Please do.
Okay.
Thank you. And I'm sure the Hilltop would love that.
Okay. Any questions? All right. Next is another one that's a long-standing one. The installation of a traffic signal at 46 and Elmore. This has been one that has been called for a long time. But it's an interesting conundrum that we have that per that MUTCD, that Manual Uniform Traffic Control, you have to hit certain warrants to need a traffic light. We didn't hit those warrants because what people would do is, if you take a look at the map, and if this works, people would actually take this access road to the north, and they would travel north till you hit near that Sonic where there's a traffic light. And so they would avoid the intersection, which makes sense, completely understandable, except we didn't hit our traffic warrants to need a light. So it was a little bit of, chicken or the egg. However, we're able to then get that now. So we've secured a $300,000 grant from the state to pair with $100,000 from the city to install a traffic signal here. Yep. Next is, as we continue to look at traffic safety throughout the city, Kimberly and 36, a reconfiguration of this particular strike right in here is basically to put in a median here. So when people are either coming eastbound turning south or they're going here, that there's a delineated way to keep traffic from basically running in there. And we've actually able to secure a $150,000 grant through the state, which we're estimating should cover the cost. So there's actually at this time no projected city costs into this particular project.
So I think this is good. I think this is good. My question is there a long enough turn lane from Kimberly to Davenport, because I think you have a lot of Central High students who are going to Brady Street Stadium, and a lot of them take that left on 36th, and they'll be pushed up to Davenport. And so I want to make sure that, A, that left-hand turn lane is sufficient to handle that traffic that's going to be turning left, and that the sequence allows for more cars to go left so that they can get through.
Okay. Yep, we'll verify that. Next is Eastern Avenue at Veterans, so a roundabout. So this is in an out year. So in 2028, $300,000 to leverage against a $1.5 million federal grant opportunity. So it's about $1.8 million. Once again, this is 3+ years out in terms of the, but it's from looking at it from a planning perspective. Next, as we move forward, then we look to the intersection of Kimberly and Fairmount. Likewise, we have this in an out year. But this will be the first time that this particular project shows up within our 6-year plan as we start advocating for this particular intersection, specifically as it relates to a state highway, and working with the state on finding out how we can get different resources to this so we can leverage our own and to make this a safer intersection. And at the the 2 last slides we have is just various water pollution control plant projects. I know we have talked about this pretty extensively last year, so I won't belabor the point. So our digester program, that project, which is about a $27 million upgrade, that particular project is well under design and it's moving forward. So in fiscal year 26, 2.1, in 27 and 28, 25 million. Clarifiers, about $2.1 million in the next 2 years. Our bar screen, about $5.3 million in next fiscal year budget as well. So just to show you, this is the clarifiers are in blue, the digesters are in orange, and the aeration basins are in purple. And the bar screen is a little tiny building that's in yellow. I will like to say, I know Alderman Dunn will ask me the question, so I'm going to preempt him. Our friends at our 2080 communities will be paying parts for this right here because they own part of the facility as well. And last is flood mitigation phase 2 for the water pollution control plant. So currently right now, and this is one of those assumptions we're making. So we have been working last year. So this is, I know the mayor was heavily involved. The federal system has, I think they refer to it as community funding projects, formerly known as earmarks. And so they have those. So we worked with Congresswoman Miller Meeks and her staff, and we were able to get about $3.3 million put into there for the second phase, which is the green shaded portion of what's in front of you. Currently right now, where it sits, last fall, early in the fall, it passed the Appropriations Committee in the House of Representatives, and it basically sat there in the Senate. There it currently still sits. So we are actively tracking that because the federal government hasn't passed a new budget. They're just doing a continuing resolution. So we're actively tracking that with our federal delegation to see if that continues. If it doesn't, then our city funding it kind of melts away, and we continue to advocate for this particular project. I will say what is in red is the $13.5 million berm that's currently under construction that's expected to be completed at the end of this year. And with that, Your Honor, I am
And
done.
just you've heard my speech before on this. There's still millions and millions and millions of dollars of work that needs to be done here. We're keeping the consent order down because of all the work we've done outside to get to this, the I&I and et cetera, and the sewer line, everything goes to helping keep the consent order off this facility. But as you saw with the $25 million digester program, there's still millions and millions of dollars that the state and or others says we have to do here. So when you talk to folks, the funding opportunities for grants, this is it. If you want my mic, yep, I told you that, and I'm not using it, right? So I apologize. I apologize. I owe you a beer for that. So this is it. Besides the hazmat truck and some of the other things and projects that you all saw here, if this doesn't get continually huge amounts of funding, we don't flush toilets, right? With the work of the Duck Creek and the west, everybody remembers the West Side Diversion Tunnel, right? To take pressure off the sewer system that goes around Kimberly all the way down to Bettendorf and around, then we did the 1930 sewer to take pressure off. And we're doing the Duck Creek to take pressure off, and the I&I to take pressure off of that. But the state's view of that is it's old and we need a new one. We've kept them off the consent order because of all the work we're doing, and we're getting help with federal grants to do digesters and the Protect grant to keep it from flooding. But there's still millions, so when you're talking to your folks, this is it. And I don't mean no disrespect to anything else, but if we don't continue to get money for this, somebody sitting around this table in the future is gonna have to do something in the realm of much more than $25 million, much more than $50 million, right? So just know that, and that this is the priority, in my opinion. Clay, thank you very much. City Administrator?
I don't have.
Anybody have any, please?
You're 100% correct. That's why I asked you to use the microphone so everybody could hear.
Yeah, I appreciate, this is it. There's no other priority.
Very important.
That's right, this is the thing.
The one thing we didn't cover, or maybe I missed it, was Modern Woodland Park.
Correct. So that is our contractual amount is built into the budget. I would say what part of that is, a large part of that is paying ourselves back for work that's already been performed, and that should be indicated in the individual project page that's there. So, yep.
That money is, there's not that amount of money to spend there this year.
That is correct. And then I do know I'm going to send something out to the subcommittee. So we have some information to go over in the next week or two. And so I'll get with all you on what's a good time, and then we'll all meet and work through some of that new information. Yep.
So just hand the mic.
Yeah, right.
I see it's going down. When are we finished with Davenport now? It's down to 150,000 in 2031. I can't remember how. I remember when it ended, sort of, but when is that done?
Roughly that 2031, 2032, but we'll specifically get you a date on what that is. But it is certainly nice in that 6 year to see it finally coming down. Yep. Yes. So still a substantial amount of money. Yes.
Okay. Okay. Sorry. Okay, anything else? I don't know if it's working or not. Anybody else? Okay, thank you very much. Have a nice weekend.